You call it the China virus, the Chinese virus. Don't you realize that's racist? Don't you realize that you're going to get Chinese hurt by calling it the Chinese virus? It's racist. And he just goes, no, it's not. Why do you keep calling it the Chinese virus? And he goes, because it's from China. I think a lot of people go, I like Trump, but the problem is he drives my wife nuts and I got to live with her.
Do you need Hollywood anymore? Do you still need them maybe the same way you might have needed them 20 years ago?
No, I don't need them at all. And thank God. If you were at a convention for flat earthers and you had to get up in the podium and speak, would you say the earth is flat? And my answer is, I wouldn't. I'd say the earth is round, and then everyone would start booing. And I'd say, I don't know what you want me to tell you, that's what it is. And then the after party would suck for me. But the earth is round, so that's what I'm gonna say. And that's how I felt about COVID. So the after party sucked, living in Hollywood and speaking the way I was speaking about COVID. But what are my choices? Join you in saying the earth is flat? I couldn't live with myself. If you can't say what you want to say as a comedian, I think it's time to hang it up.
The world is changing. Inspiration is everywhere. It has never been so easy to connect, share, and bring people together. We're learning from others and finding the best in ourselves. Challenging our beliefs. Sharing our vulnerability. Overcoming our fears. Transforming ourselves so we can transform the world. How far can we go?
This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is...
This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is Adam Carolla, the actor, comedian, podcasting host, and best-selling author. Your career began some 30 years ago as a radio personality and co-host of the popular phone-in show Loveline, which then moved to television on MTV. In 2009, you launched the Adam Carolla Show, which quickly became the #1 podcast on iTunes and subsequently broke the Guinness World Record for the most downloaded of all time. You've starred in, produced, and directed many films, appeared on Celebrity Apprentice and Dancing with the Stars, and continue to be one of the most popular figures on the stand-up comedy circuit. As an author, you published 6 books, most notably In 50 Years We'll All Be Chicks, which debuted on the New York Times bestseller list. Your latest book, Everything Reminds Me of Something, gives readers a glimpse of your unique perspective on the world as an antidote to the politically correct woke times in which we now live. Adam, welcome to London Real.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, it's great to have you here. I just want to say, we started back in 2011, and you were like the king of podcasting at the time. You were super inspirational to all the people that had never heard of podcasting over here in the UK. And I was just curious, like back then, did you see podcasting as this new tech of the future, or was it a way of just you having control of your own show, or was it just fun? I'm just kind of curious how that all started with you.
I didn't plot it out that precisely. I worked in radio. I got fired from my last radio job in 2009. The station flipped formats, the economy turned down, and I was just out of a job. And so I just went into podcasting, directly from radio. And there wasn't a business model attached to podcasting back in 2009. This is early, like February 2009. And, but I committed to do it every day, and I didn't get paid. And it cost me a lot of money in bandwidth back then, because I guess bandwidth cost more back then. And the show was popular, so it used up a lot of bandwidth. So I was paying probably about $9,000 or $10,000 a month in bandwidth, and there was no income. But I did it every day anyway, and I had some sort of it wouldn't be a belief or faith. I just sort of had this sort of motivation. It felt like the right thing to do, I guess is how I would describe it. It didn't really feel like a business. It felt like maybe it could be a business, but it just felt like the right thing to do for me.
And do you remember when it became a business? Was it like 3 years or 4 years later?
No, it happened in sort of dribs and drabs. It first became apparent that we could use it as a tool to sell tickets to live events and appearances and things like that. So it became fairly immediately clear that, well, if you couldn't make money directly from podcasting, you could make money indirectly from it by saying, I was going to be down at this club or at this theater on this date, and the tickets would sell very quickly. Later, there became this Amazon affiliate program where people could click on some link on Amazon, and when they made an Amazon purchase, 1% of it would go toward you or something. So I guess the conceit was sort of like, you like this podcast, you get it for free, it cost us money. Why don't you just put us in your Amazon link and we'll get whatever, a 0.5% or whatever you spend on Amazon, or some version of that. Almost a little like a subscription, but it wasn't really a subscription. And started making like pretty good money just based on Amazon affiliate links. So now some money's starting to come in from Amazon links, some money's starting to come on from doing live events. And then at some point, some sponsors, kind of people you've never heard of, companies you've never heard of, started to kind of trickle in. And people started going, well, if he's got a big audience, what's the difference between a radio audience or a podcast audience? And then it turned out a lot of it was, I think a lot of the beginning of stuff was like affiliate stuff where they would say, flowers.com would come on during Valentine's Day and go, we'll give you $3 for every $25 bouquet you sell. And it was all super effective. We sold tons of bouquets and, and we got paid that way. And I guess it started to dawn on people that this not only could rival radio or television as far as advertising goes, but it could surpass it in terms of a more dedicated fan base, a more motivated fan base.
And now fast forward to today where, Spotify is in the business and places like Gimlet Media get scooped up for a couple $100 million. What do you make of it now compared to then?
Well, it's probably not unlike a lot of businesses in that it didn't exist and now it does exist. I don't find it astounding because that's all business is. Something doesn't exist and then I didn't grow up with a smartphone. Now every human being I know has a smartphone. So there's always, or an electric car, or some stuff's technology, some stuff's just, I never heard of Netflix when I was growing up, and now everyone has Netflix. Like, some of it is fashion, some of it's technology, some of it is the whims of society and the trends of society. But it's like, it's like no one had an iPhone, now everyone has an iPhone. Nobody for the first 10 years of the iPhone had one of those weird little cases where you could keep your credit cards in the back of them. Now, everybody I know who has an iPhone has a weird little case where you can put your credit cards and driver's license behind it. And 5 years ago, nobody had one. Now everyone has one. So that's how business works. And this is, to me, just more of that.
Okay. And just to finish with podcasting, do you think it'll be around 100 years from now? And do you think it'll be the same? Do you think humans will always want to hear each other talk in that type of a format?
Yeah, I mean, thankfully, I think that humans crave an interaction, even if it's sort of a one-way street. I don't, concerts, I mean, let's really think about concerts or plays. Those have been going on for 2,000 years, different. I mean, now the sound is amplified and there's a pyrotechnics display that goes along with it. And, Tommy Lee is in a shark cage spinning around with a drum kit. And I guess the ancient Romans could have never envisioned that. But if you take a look at concerts or plays or musicals or live spoken word events, it's not really changed. So I don't imagine this would change much either.
Okay. And like on that note you just said, do you think everything will get into the metaverse in 25 years from now, Adam, where we'll all just be doing it with our, Facebook Meta goggles or not?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the delivery system is going to change. For a while, when I started podcasting, the big talk was cars are going to be able to get the internet, like cars are going to have podcasts. And there was talk like in 2009, 2010, like, oh, BMW is going to come out with a 3 Series and you're going to be able to get the internet on it. And I guess at the time, no one figured out the phone part. They didn't figure out the part where you're going to get everything on your phone and then you're going to plug it in. This was back when a lot of cars had a CD changer in the back that held 6 CDs, and that kind of stuff. And so we won't always know. Like, I was wrong. Everyone around me was wrong. We were hoping podcasting could get into the cars via the stereo, not via the phone, But that kind of stuff's going to surprise us along the way. But I think the nuts and the bolts will remain.
Yeah, it feels like people will always want to listen to other people talking and other people performing, and whether it's live or VR or recorded. I guess it's probably not going anywhere. I wanted to ask you about the book because it's you answering real questions from real people, and you cover everything from cancel culture to Hollywood to wokeness to the economy to the president, I think. This book kind of just came to you, and again, I think you originally had a different title, Ask an Asshole, Advice and Answers from the Least Apologetic Man in Comedy, but I think your publishers convinced you differently. But yeah, tell me about the genesis of how this book happened.
When you write books, you write a book and I don't know, a year and a half goes by and then your publisher says, do you want to write another book? And then I usually say, yes. And then they go, what do you want to write it about? Then you think about it for a while. And the concept of answering questions, having a book of answers that people provided, it just seemed like a good fit because that's what I have done my whole life. I started off in radio that way, doing Loveline, where people would call in and ask advice, and then I'd give answers, and oftentimes comedic answers, but I'd still give answers. And so it just became sort of natural that after writing 5 books where you sit down and write, that you do one where you answer questions. And it turned out to be an interesting experiment, because if you think about it, when you write a book, you usually just sit down and you go, what do I want to talk about? And that's kind of the process of writing a book. And then you start organizing it, well, I want to talk about this and I want to talk about that. Well, that would fit under the heading of politics or family or pop culture. You start shuffling things around and making chapters. This is kind of interesting in that I didn't sit around and go, what do I want to write about? Because people would ask me a question. And some of the questions I'd have to think, I've never thought about that. Like, I don't have thoughts about that. I need to force myself to form thoughts about stuff. So, imagine any author you enjoy and they write about politics or the Old West or World War II. And then you just start asking them questions about other stuff. And now that same person would have to go, I never thought about that, but here's my answer. And so it made it kind of interesting for me.
Nice. So you got some fresh angles, some fresh content, as opposed to if you had just come up with something, or your publisher, it would have been something you probably were familiar with.
Well, when you get to your 6th or 7th book and you start writing down stuff you want to talk about, I do it with a writing partner who's a stenographer, essentially, because I can't type. And I find myself saying to Mike Lynch, who's physically doing the writing, I start going off on some tangent, and then I would stop and I would go, did I say this in any of my other books? Because you lose track. And then he'll go, oh yeah, and not Taco Bell material, I think you did that jag in that book. And I go, oh, I did? Oh, all right, well, that's off the table. Now I got to come up with something else, because these are all your thoughts and you're bound to repeat them. And by the time you get to, like I said, your 6th or 7th book, you've now written down, 2,000 pages of your thoughts. And, one only has so many thoughts. So this kind of is interesting because you don't run into that syndrome of like, did I already talk about this? Because I didn't talk about it because someone else has asked the question.
Right. Oh, that's fascinating. Tell me about a few things. First of all, how is California? I grew up there in San Diego until I was 18, and then I moved out. But I watch it now from afar, and sometimes it's hard to believe some of the things that happen there. You're still there, although it doesn't seem to jibe with the way you think about life. So what's it like, and how long are you going to stay?
Well, I was born and bred in Southern California. I wasn't really bred. I was just kind of born. My parents didn't do a lot of breeding. I have to figure that one out. And then I got out of high school. I got into construction. I just became a builder in my early part of my career. And I didn't really know you could move anywhere. California used to be, you just lived in California and everyone sort of came to you. You know what I mean? Like kind of an elitism. And I guess it'd be like, it's like you lived in Disneyland and somebody was like, you want to go down the street and go check out someone else's whatever? And you'd be like, no, I'm in Disneyland. People come here. I will wait for you in California. And then I got into show business. And, once I got into show business, then it was like, well, this is where show business is. So I stayed here and I slowly kind of watched it erode over the years. And, just high taxes and wildfires and badly managed and homeless situation and overregulated and, blah, blah, blah. And I started to kind of watch it come undone. But I also have 16-year-old twins who are in their junior year of high school. So I would never want to uproot them. So I kind of thought, well, I'll hang out here until they graduate high school. and then probably start looking for a different place to live.
Okay. And how is the wokeness factor now in LA? Like, what does it feel like to be there and be around the people there?
It's like, it kind of depends. I mean, I was just on the set of a TV show for a day, and it's, big union, everything. And they're very COVIDed out on the set, and they're very paranoid. And so what it's essentially created two groups. It's basically a group of people that are very fanatical about COVID or woke culture or policy or whatever. It's a smaller group. It's probably 10 or 15%. And then a very large group of people who are scared for their jobs, and also just scared for their social standing. They don't want to be ostracized, who are then following this small minority of sort of lunatic kind of nut jobs that are sort of dictating policy. So it's not like most people agree with the lunatics. It's that the lunatics could get you removed from your livelihood. And so most people go along with it for fear. And I was actually talking to Greg Gutfeld, about this a couple of weeks ago on my podcast. And he said, there are a small group of people who break away from that and say, I'm not playing. I'm not going along with your lunacy. I'm not wearing a mask outside. I'm not, I'm not wearing rubber gloves inside an Uber. I'm going to speak out against this. I disagree with it. A boy's a girl and a girl's a boy. And, we have to call everyone birthing people now because men can give birth and stuff. There is a small group of people who push back against that and fight against it. But we're starting to kind of drill down on like, who are those people? And I came up with the conclusion that they're people that are good at their jobs and do not fear being removed from their livelihood, because you can cancel fair to middling, mediocre people, maybe even decent at their job people, but you have a real hard time with canceling excellent people. And whether you're a writer or welder, I do a lot of car work, and I have a guy who works for me, and he's an excellent fabricator. He can put metal together and shape it any way you want. And I have to treat that guy fairly and decently and with a certain amount of respect, because if I start riding that guy or hassling that guy, he'll just go across the street. He knows he's good at what he does. Like when I was a carpenter, I was a good carpenter. I would come to your home, I would work on your home, and you didn't have to put out a plate of cookies for me, but you had to treat me decently. And if you started to not, I would just leave, because I was a good carpenter and I could find work anywhere. And so if you're really good at what you do, you will find work even in Hollywood, or you'll just break off and do your own thing. You can't cancel Joe Rogan. You can't cancel Ben Shapiro. They just go do their own thing. But the lion's share of people are not excellent. They just get along. And Hollywood is filled with people that just get along, and people that just get along who are overcompensated. So you take a combination of overcompensated and we don't really need you that much here, you better shut your mouth and get in line. And that's what we have. And they don't like people like me who ignore them in their decrees because I guess it makes them feel powerless in some way. But I have decided that I am good enough not to listen to them. And people say, does that hurt your career? And the answer is, yeah, it does. But I'm good. And I get to do what I want. And that's part of being a comedian. It's not all about how much money you make. It's about saying what you want to say. And if you can't say what you want to say as a comedian, I think it's time to hang it up.
And I guess that's my next question, Adam. Do you need Hollywood anymore? Because you're writing books, you're doing comedy, you've got your show. Do you still need them maybe the same way you might have needed them 20 years ago?
No, I don't need them at all. And thank God, because right. I'm not welcome. I mean, there is no Hollywood for me. It's all my own. I generate my own business. I do not get calls to do TV shows or sitcoms or guest appearances, or there is no Hollywood for me. I was pretty much done, or I should say Hollywood was pretty much done with me 5 years ago. And then when COVID hit, that was it. I mean, it was essentially a relationship that was on the rocks for 5 years. And then someone just caught me having sex with my wife's sister, and that's it. Now it's over. So COVID put the last nail in, I'd say, the coffin of me in Hollywood.
Is that because what you said about COVID?
I think what I said, how I acted, yes, for sure. Okay. What I said about COVID.
And so it sounds like in Hollywood and maybe in other places in the U.S., you're on one side where you have to choose all the same issues, as in I wear the mask, I feel the same about COVID, I vote Democrat, genders are fluid, there's birthers. It sounds like you have to make all of those choices on this side, and if you're on the other side, if you disagree with some of those. Is it very much like that?
Yeah, it's very much like they don't allow a lot of wiggle room or nuance of thought. So I have elderly parents and I have young kids. And as it pertains to, let's say, the vaccine. So I would say, by the way, I've never said a word about vaccines my entire life. I'm not Robert Kennedy Jr. I'm like, vaccines. Yeah, sure. Get a vaccine. Makes sense to me. You know, if you're traveling to Africa, get a vaccine for malaria or whatever you got to do. Like I've never given it any thought. I've just went, whatever the doctor tells you to do, or whatever the school board tells you to do, go do it. But then let's say the COVID vaccine came about. So I would say to my elderly parents, you should get the vaccine. And then I would say to my teenage son, you don't need the vaccine. You're healthy, you're young. It's not going to affect you like it would affect my parents. And I have no idea what the ramifications of the vaccine down the road for you might be, 15-year-old. For you, 90-year-old, who cares? So get the vaccine and you don't get the vaccine. That then makes you an anti-vaxxer in the eyes of Hollywood, even though I've never said anything about vaccines my entire career because I've had no thoughts about them. This one I sized up and went, you get it and you don't need it. And those kind of thoughts, or why are we wearing masks outside, or many other nuanced thoughts like that, those are the kind of thoughts that would get you put into a sort of COVID denier, I guess, group. And that's where it is. Now, for me, and most people are scared, and most people have to work in Hollywood. That's their livelihood. So they don't agree with it, but they definitely shut up about it because they're frightened. And look, rightfully so. A lot of people have been canceled. So for me, it's like I say to people, they go, well, then you get ostracized and you get criticized and you get shunned. And they go, isn't that uncomfortable? Like, don't you dislike that? And I go, well, to some extent, yeah. Everyone wants to be invited to the party. But I said, if you were at a convention for flat earthers and you had to get up in the podium and speak, would you say the earth is flat? And my answer is, I wouldn't. I'd say the earth is round. And then everyone would start booing. And I'd say, I don't know what you want me to tell you. That's what it is. And then the after party would suck for me. But the earth is round. So that's what I'm going to say. And that's how I felt about COVID. So the after party sucked, living in Hollywood and speaking the way I was speaking about COVID. But what are my choices? Join you in saying the earth is flat? I couldn't live with myself.
Yeah, I always love that analogy. It's funny, when all that was happening in 2020, we got into a big fight with YouTube with kind of freedom of speech issues. And that was always one of my examples. Like the flat earthers, they were all over YouTube and they were allowed to talk about things that were crazy. But if you had different opinions on, masks and COVID and vaccines, those were taken off. So it's always kind of a fascinating.
It'll all come out that it was all part of the big plan anyway. It's already trickling out that all these big tech companies were in cahoots with the government and the messaging and the deplatforming dissenting voices. It's all going to come out. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but it's all going to come out that people were being silenced and it wasn't a coincidence.
Yeah, we felt the sharp end of that. I always thought crazy people got censored until it happens to you. And then you're like, oh, it's not just... I got
put in YouTube jail because we played a clip of the guy who runs County USC Hospital saying, we're not full. Our ICU is not full. We're not filled with COVID patients. We have open beds. I don't know what people are saying. That's not what's happening at our hospital. The guy who runs the hospital said that. We showed the clip and we got put in YouTube jail for COVID misinformation. So these people they're insane, but obviously insane with an agenda. And that's the scary part.
Yeah. Yeah. This will all be dissected 10, 20 years from now, and it'll be a fascinating documentary, right?
Yes.
Or series of. You mentioned you got 16-year-olds. My daughter's 18 and she's going off to university in Boston. And Adam, I was wondering if you could tell me, first of all, is that a good idea? Because I went and visited and I start to get the pulse of what universities are like these days. And it's not when I went to school 30 years ago, they seem very different. I know you did a whole film with this with Dennis Prager and he's been on the show, but will your twins be going to university? What do we need to know about what's happening at universities now? And is there anything we can do about it?
Well, I think my daughter wants to go. I don't think my son is much interested in going to university. If you think about it, I know there's thoughts, guys like Dennis Prager and a lot of people that think, well, you go off to college and then you get indoctrinated into this world and this sort of politically incorrect, sort of insane world, which is true. But if you really think about it, it starts in high school now. It's kind of ubiquitous, it'll start in grade school now. It's kind of everywhere. So maybe this fear of going off to college and being indoctrinated is unfounded because your kid's already being poisoned at the junior high level, if you think about the new world order, So good news and bad news, you don't have to worry about your kid being poisoned in college. The bad news is they were already poisoned by the 8th grade with all the nonsense. So I'm not much interested in college. I never have been. Mainly based on life experience. I've never met anybody who I've worked with where college factored into the work. Now, I was a carpenter and then I was a comedian. So, I didn't work in engineering, but I worked, most of the successful people I know either didn't complete college or did complete college with some other degree that's neither here nor there in whatever they do today. And also, I used to, when we did the Man Show every year, we would read piles of writer submissions. Everyone wanted to write on the Man Show, and we'd have to go through all these writer submissions. And they would say the guy went to Harvard or Yale or Stanford or Princeton or San Diego State or CSUN or no college. But ultimately, we would just read the writer's packet, and the funniest writer's packet we would hire. And if they went to Harvard, I guess that was like a little extra window dressing or something, but we'd hire the guy from Cal State Northridge over the guy who went to Yale if his writer's packet was a little bit funnier. And if there's a guy who took a few units at the junior college and then dropped out to work in his dad's landscaping business, and his was funnier than the guy from Cal State Northridge, we'd hire that guy. So it became kind of clear to me that it's all about performance. Nobody cares. I mean, think about all the people. I mean, you kind of think about, Jeff Bezos, Richard Branson, like, what college did they go to? And my answer is, I don't know. Maybe they went to a great college. Maybe they didn't go to a good college. Or you think about the voices you enjoy the most, or the thinkers, or the people you're most attracted to philosophically. Where did they go to college? The answer is, I don't know. I don't know if they went to college. I don't care. It's not factoring in for me. And I think as a society, we're getting more and more like that.
Plus, there's a lot of self-education going on these days. I mean,
oh my God, yes.
I mean, with everything on the internet and YouTube and everything, you can kind of do a lot of self-teaching there. But yeah, it's a good point. I guess it does start super early these days, so you're not going to get away from it, I guess, per se.
Right. Yeah.
When you look at politics in America and you look at President Biden and you look at a potential Trump coming back or whatever happening in the Republican Party, what do you see? And is that a reflection of America? And have you ever seen politics this way in your entire life?
No, I haven't. And Biden is horrible, not just because of, bad policies, but he's really turned out to be kind of a despicable person, in that he ran on this unity kind of platform. He was, it was basically Trump was president, and for 4 years, the Democrats their hair was on fire. They were just going nuts. They just were the most agitated ever. And it was like Biden came in, and it was like just kind of slow and steady old Joe, you know what you were getting. And so he sort of came in and he sort of went, it's going to end, all the craziness. So the thing about Trump is Trump's policies weren't crazy, but he drove people crazy. And so it was sort of like a half-baked analogy, but let's just say you and your wife were living together and you hired a full-time nanny to take care of your kids. And your wife was like, she drives me nuts. She's making me crazy. And then you were like, all she does is cook and clean all day. And then when she goes home at night, she sends out a tweet that you hate, And then I would say to my wife, look, the house is clean. There's food in the refrigerator. The kid's diaper's been changed. And she would keep going, she's driving me nuts. She's driving me nuts. I don't like the way she dresses. I don't like the car she drives. I don't like the tweet she sends out when she gets back to her apartment. And I'm saying to the wife, who cares? We got a clean house and there's food on, she makes a great lasagna. And then at a certain point you go, listen, to the nanny, you go, you're a good nanny, but you're driving my wife nuts. And I have to fire you because I have to live with my wife. And I just want calm. I just want calm. You know what I mean? And you go, okay, she's going insane. I don't want to live with an insane person. I'm sorry. And you get rid of the nanny. And then Joe comes in and Joe goes, you tired of the craziness? I'm the guy for you. We can get back to normal. Americans, living with Americans, not going insane. And that's how he pitched himself. And then he went right down this, white supremacy is the biggest problem this country has. And he went down this weird racial division road and saying Jim Crow 2.0 over and over again. And he just went right into this sort of divisive, we're at each other's throats again world. So whatever the unity he sort of promised, he did not pursue that.
And will he get reelected? And then is Trump coming back? And what do you think about that?
Will Joe Biden get reelected?
Yeah.
No, even his own party hates him. He's clearly deficient. I mean, there's something wrong with him. So I don't think physically he's capable of it, but I don't think anyone is interested in Joe Biden.
And are they interested in Trump coming back?
The thing about Trump is I'll tell you what hurts Trump. What hurts Trump is the nanny who drives the wife crazy syndrome. Like, I think there's a fair number of conservatives and a fair number of Republicans and a fair number of independents who say, look, what he did in the Middle East in terms of peace accords, that was great. Moving the embassy to Jerusalem, that was great. I agree with him on the border. I think we need a stiffer, stouter border. Yeah, I want him to lower taxes. I like a lot of his ideas. I just don't want to have to live with the insane people who go nuts. It's 4 years of people going insane. And so I think there's a lot of people that go, I like Trump. I like his policies. I don't really care if he sends out weird tweets in the middle of the night. I want the corporate tax rate lowered or whatever it is Trump is. I want to be energy independent. Okay, this country's having a lot of difficulty with energy. I liked Trump's policy with energy because under Trump, we had energy independence, and under Biden, we have to.
To continue watching the rest of the episode for free, visit our website, londonreal.tv, or click the link in the description below.